There is a word in the Akan language that has no direct translation in any other tongue. Enkinkium. It describes something that twists and turns, that doubles back on itself, that changes shape, but is always, underneath all the changes, the same essential thing moving in the same essential direction. The Adinkra symbol for Enkinkium is a twisted, looping form that looks like a road that has lost its mind, turning back on itself, revering, spiraling. But if you step back far enough and look at the whole shape at once, you see that it has been going somewhere all along. Every step Kofi Asante-Boateng had taken since the festival of Adwira had been Enkinkium. He simply did not know it yet. Keta announced itself first as smell. Ancient salt, not the thin, dry salt of Harmattan air, but deep salt, the kind that lives in the body of the sea and radiates outward for miles. Smoked fish, wet rope and timber, coconut palms bending in a wind that came from the south, from the ocean, carrying all the way from a horizon that had no name. The town was built on a strip of land barely wide enough to hold it, the Keta lagoon on one side, broad and still, and the color of old bronze in the afternoon light, and the Atlantic on the other, green and vast and in full voice. Between them, narrow lanes between compound houses of whitewashed shell and coral, their roofs built low against the ocean winds. Long, narrow fishing boats drawn up on the lagoon bank, each painted in brilliant colors, each bearing the totemic marks of the family that owned it. At the town's center, tall Atrikpui drums unmanned waiting for evening. At every doorpost, protective symbols of the Anlo-Yu, cowrie shells in patterns, red clay marks, strings of blue glass beads against the evil eye. Kofi stood at the edge of this place he had never seen in his life, and felt, for reasons he could not explain and would not have been able to name even if asked, the particular, bone-deep sensation of arriving somewhere you have never been and somehow already know. He told himself it was exhaustion. He told himself it was relief at having finally reached the furthest possible point from the prophecy's origin. He found a guest house near the lagoon, low-roofed, seafoam walls, run by a woman named Amadi Zifa, who had the manner of someone who had seen everything twice already and was no longer surprised by any of it. She gave him a room, a bowl of a below corn cake and fetri detsi, thick okra soup with dried shrimp, without asking a single question about where he had come from or where he was going. He ate everything. He slept without dreaming. For the first time in weeks, he did not count the days. On the second morning, Kofi rose before the sun for his libation. He went to the lagoon edge. The water lay completely flat, a mirror of absolute black holding the last stars in perfect, motionless reflection. He knelt in the damp earth, unpacked the clay libation pot his grandmother's, carried from Kumasi, the one irreplaceable thing in his bag. He had been careful with it through the entire journey. He poured. He began to call the names, the long chain of ancestors, stretching back as far as memory could carry. He was halfway through when he felt it. Under his thumb where he gripped the pot, a crack. Fine, almost invisible in the pre-dawn dark. But there, a crack running from the rim downward. He pressed it gently. It widened the smallest amount. He stared at it. He told himself the crack had been there before he left Kumasi. He told himself it was old. He told himself it meant nothing. All three of these things were untrue, and some part of him knew it. But he continued, pressing his thumb against the crack to slow the leak, calling the names of the dead across the water, watching the palm wine darken the earth of a place his ancestors had never walked. The last of the wine drained out through the crack before he reached the final name. He held the empty pot. He sat for a long time watching the lagoon. He put the pot away and told himself he would find another. He was still alive. The season had begun, but he was alive and he was in Keta, and this was nowhere in any prophecy. He was beyond the reach of it. He had never in his life been closer to it. On the third morning, Kofi went to see the ocean. He had been in Keta 2 full days and had not yet stood before it. He could hear it from his room, but something in him had held back without knowing why. On the third morning, he woke with a certainty he could not explain. He should go, not an urge, a summons. The beach was dark wet sand, wide at low tide. The waves arrived in long green walls that broke white and ran foaming toward his feet. The horizon was the most complete straight line he had ever seen, a razor's edge between deep green and pale blue, with nothing beyond it but the curve of the world disappearing into itself. He took off his sandals. He walked to the water's edge. The first wave reached him, cold, startling, and the sand shifted under his feet with that pulling, sucking sensation of the tidal undertow. And for a moment he was smiling. He thought, I am here, I have made it. The season of the dry wind has come and I am alive. I have done the impossible thing. I have outrun what was written. He closed his eyes. He breathed the salt air. And then the woman spoke. She had been standing there 20 steps to his left since before he arrived. Or perhaps she had come after him. He had not heard her approach over the surf. An old woman, ancient in the way that certain people become not frail but condensed, as if time had taken everything extraneous and left only the essential. She wore the white cloth of the Yev spirit cult, the Anlo Yu devotees of Mama, the divine force of the ocean. Complete white, no color, no pattern. Around her neck, Azagba beads, dark blue and white, the sacred beads of those who speak for the water. Her head was wrapped in white. Her feet were bare on the wet sand. The tide had drawn a line around her feet. She had been standing there long enough that the water knew exactly where she was. She was not looking at the ocean. She was looking at him. And her eyes were white. The recognition hit Kofi like cold water, not fear, but something older and more devastating than fear. The certainty of a thing that has been true all along and has only now allowed itself to be seen. The same white cloth, the same white eyes. This was not a coincidence. This was a message. She spoke in Twi, his language, in a voice that should not have carried over the surf, but did. The one who runs from what was spoken at home always runs to the place where it was meant to happen. Kofi's feet went into the sand. He turned to face her fully. He said in a voice that no longer sounded like his own, "Who sent you? Who are you? Who told you to be here?" She did not answer. She looked at him with the steady, unhurried gaze of a midwife or a priest at a burial, someone who has agreed to be present at a moment they cannot prevent but can accompany. He stepped toward her, and the wave came. Not a large wave. A rogue swell, knee-height, arriving at an angle the rhythm of the surf had not prepared him for. It struck him at the back of his left knee. The joint slightly bent from stepping forward, and his weight shifted wrong, his sandal-less foot finding nothing in the wet sand, and he fell. Hard. The next wave washed over his face before he could rise, salt in his mouth, in his eyes. He pushed up, coughing. His knee ached. His hands were cut by a shell buried in the sand. He sat in the surf, soaked. The Sika Futuro Kente plastered to his body, the gold threads dark with seawater. That cloth his grandmother had stayed up all night to commission. Those gold threads of Sika Futuro dark now, heavy with the sea. The old woman had not moved. Kofi pressed his palm against his chest. The pain was there. Deep, quiet. Not a wound, nothing that could be stitched or treated. Something interior, something structural. The kind of pain the body does not produce as a complaint, but as an announcement. He walked up the beach. He sat down against the hull of a fishing boat drawn up on the sand. A long, narrow Anlo craft, painted deep red and black. The name of its owner in white letters on the bow, a hornbill painted on the stern. He pressed his palm flat against his chest, over the wet gold cloth. The pain bloomed, slowly, completely, the way a flower blooms not urgently but fully. He looked at the ocean. He thought of Akasua. He thought of the red courtyard, ochre walls, carved doorposts, the string of bells his grandmother had hung above his sleeping platform. He thought of Apani and Agie saying, "The road does not disappear." He thought of Akasua saying, "Where you run to is where it was already waiting." He understood now, not as an idea but as a fact, the way you understand the depth of a well only by falling into it, that the prophecy had never been simply about the season of the dry wind. It had been about what he would do when told that the season of the dry wind would kill him. Every step had been the prophecy fulfilling itself. The running was the prophecy. Keta was the prophecy. The rogue wave, the red boat, the wide-eyed woman, all of it had been the prophecy building itself out of his choices the way a weaver builds cloth out of thread. He had not been running from his fate. He had been weaving it. The old woman came and sat beside him. He did not hear her approach. She was simply there, the way certain presences arrive not through space, but through necessity. She took his right hand in both of hers. Her hands were warm. That surprised him. He had expected cold, the cold of wide-eyed things, the cold of endings. But her hands were the hands of a woman who had held the hands of other people in other last moments, and they were warm and dry and completely steady. He did not speak. There was nothing left that required speaking. He looked at the ocean. The waves came and came and came, patient, absolute, each one identical and each one entirely different, the way all true things are. The sky above was that color that exists only on West African coasts in the dry season, pale blue deepening at the zenith to something almost violet, washed, enormous and clean. A pelican crossed it, slow, prehistoric, completely certain of its direction. Kofi Asante-Boateng, son of the stool carver Kweku, grandson of the man who wrestled a river spirit, wearer of the Sika Futuro Kente, rested his head against the red-painted hull of a stranger's fishing boat on the shore of Keta, in a place he had never been before in his life, in the first days of the season of the dry wind. And his heart, that strong, restless, clever, terrified heart, came to its rest. Among his possessions the fishermen found 3 lengths of kente cloth, a hunting knife with a bone handle, a brass compass, needle still pointing north, always north, as if it had not noticed, a leather amulet on his left wrist, the cord of 7 braided threads still intact, and a clay libation pot with a crack in it, through which all the palm wine had long since drained. A messenger was sent to Kumasi. He arrived on the 6th day. Akasua wept for 3 days, then stopped and began the preparations, and fed the people who came to sit with her, and did all of it with the steadiness of a river. Apani and Agie received the news on his old black stool. He poured libation, all of it, the whole pot, and called every ancestor he could name, and finally Kofi's name at the end of the chain, newly added. Then he said he built the road bravely. He ran it with everything he had, and the road was worthy of him. That is all any road can be. They tell this story in Kumasi now. They say, do not call Kofi a fool. He was a man of intelligence and love and will. His mistake was not that he ran. Running from death is the most human thing there is. His mistake was believing that the road he was running on was one he was building himself. He was not building it. He was reading it one step at a time, turning its pages with his feet, arriving page by page at the ending that had been written before the first word. What was lost when he ran was not his life. That was never his to keep indefinitely, nor is anyone's. What was lost was the version of the story where he knew what was coming and chose to spend the remaining time doing everything that time is for. Sitting with Akasua in the evening, teaching the young men in his workshop, telling his own story out loud so it could be added to the long chain that connects the living to the dead. Instead, he spent it running and arrived, breathless, alone on a beautiful shore, with a stranger's warm hand holding his, and the sea carrying on without him, and the sky enormous above it all. And so ends the story of Kofi Asante-Boateng, a man who ran from a prophecy and carried it on his back all the way to the sea. If this story moved you, if you felt something real in these 3 episodes, then please like this video. It takes 1 second and it tells us that these stories matter to you. Leave us a comment. What does Kofi's story mean to you? What would you have done in his place? And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, do it now. Ring that notification bell, because Africa has thousands of stories like this one, stories of fate and courage, and the strange wisdom hidden inside tragedy, and we are only just beginning to tell them. Every like, every comment, every new subscriber gives us the power to bring you more. More cultures, more voices, more of the ancient, extraordinary storytelling that has always lived in the heart of this continent, waiting to be heard. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. We will see you in the next story.